Hi there, my name is Lo. Welcome to my channel where I discuss everything between Hermes and grocery bags. Welcome to a new edition of Tea and Thoughts, which today will not only contain literal tea, but also a bit more of the proverbial tea, because I wanted to talk about all of the luxury drama and everything that's been in the news around luxury lately. Today I brought my new Longchamp, the pliage, in the size L. I only got this recently because winter just didn't seem to have an end this year, and I was wearing my other Longchamp bag quite a lot because, well, it's raining all the time and I really like to take these bags out if it's raining. So even though I try not to get multiples of things in different colors, this was a bit of an exception, and I really just very much liked the print and the different colors that this bag has. Also, even though it's April, it's still quite cold outside, and it's still quite cold in the house because the gas prices have been crazy, so we haven't really been overheating, which is why I'm wearing this thick vest today. In any case, what I wanted to discuss is what's been going on in luxury news recently. I didn't want to make a number of videos about this topic, so I figured I'd just cover all of them in one video. So some of the stuff that's already been discussed by a number of other content creators, and some other things I think not, or at least not so much. So let me see if I can just try and tie it all together. For that I made some notes, which is why I have my iPad over here. So the first thing I think that's been really up for discussion, and that you see a lot of YouTubers make videos about, is the idea of luxury YouTube being dead. So a number of bigger YouTubers in the luxury space have left the scene, and earlier on we already saw a trend of basically just YouTubers leaving, which I think is somewhat related, but perhaps not to the fullest extent. So the first thing we saw was very big content creators leaving YouTube because they felt that the long form videos or the long form content that they were making wasn't getting the same amount of views anymore, and the shorts that YouTube has been forcing people more towards, or at least in that point in time, was not really a medium that was working for them all that well. Or if they wanted to make shorter content, they might as well just do it on another medium like TikTok. Now again, we see some YouTubers leaving, which are somewhat of the bigger YouTubers in the luxury space. They've been doing it for a number of years. There's also YouTubers who have decided to switch out their content a little bit and to focus on other topics just besides luxury, which prompted a lot of discussion about, is luxury YouTube dying, or is it already dead? Well, frankly, I don't think it's dead. I wouldn't really say it's dying, but I would definitely say that it is changing. So as I already mentioned, there's more of a tendency for people to switch toward shorter content rather than the long form content that a lot of luxury YouTubers are doing. And even though the shorter form content is something that I think a lot of people are enjoying, it's also a new generation of people coming in and consuming content. So that would be Gen Z in this case, who seem to be drawn even more towards this shorter form content than other generations. And a lot of the YouTubers or content creators in the luxury space currently, I think, are of a somewhat older generation, so perhaps more of the millennial generation, which I'm also part of, or even a bit older than that. But a new generation is becoming of age. They're slowly entering the labor market. They are slowly gathering their own money. They can start to make decisions about what things they want to purchase, which actually brings me on to the next topic, and that is just the general attitude towards luxury of Gen Z. So earlier this week I read a very interesting article on Vice, which was basically stating that Gen Z are now saving their money to buy Birkins and Cartier pieces and other luxury, and they're spending their money on these luxury items rather than trying to save up for a house, for example. And I think the point that the article was trying to make is that from the perspective of Gen Z, it has already become pretty much impossible to buy a house because of the housing prices, the down payment that you need to make, the difficulty in getting a mortgage, especially if you're just by yourself. And this article was originally based on interviewees in the UK, but then they also translated it to the Netherlands, where I think there are fairly similar struggles for this generation. So they were quoting one interviewee in saying, I think it was about a Birkin, "Once I've bought it, it's mine. You can say the same for a mortgage." Which is absolutely true, and normally, of course, a mortgage is just a very long and expensive form for paying for something, right? Vice was basically saying in the article that Gen Z is rather looking to set their sights on more attainable short-term luxury goals rather than these long-term goals of saving up for a house. And because they are not saving up for a house, a lot of these Gen Zs spending their money on luxury still end up living with their parents. They didn't say anything about how the parents felt about that. Frankly, I think I would have been kicked out of the house by 25 or so I left voluntarily when I was 18, but again, those were different days. And what I also found interesting, and that also ties in quite a bit, I think, with the quiet luxury trend that's been going on right now, that Gen Z is also spending their money more on the low-key luxury. And it might be surprising because low-key luxury or the quiet luxury is often associated with the old money people, while the new money people are buying more flashy things like the Louis Vuitton monogram, Gucci, that kind of stuff. But frankly, these Gen Zs who are just saving up to buy one Birkin, I would almost classify as no money people. But still, they prefer to go for more timeless pieces. So I don't think there's a lot of clarity per se about why that would be the case, but some of the arguments that came up is that these timeless pieces will just last longer, so it's easier to get the cost per wear out of an item. It might partially also be sustainability, so this is really more of the generation who is making more of a fuss about sustainability and maintaining planet Earth for themselves and future generations. One other article actually coined that for them it also might be sort of a nostalgia. So for millennials like myself, I grew up in the 90s and I reached adulthood towards the end of the 2000s. So by the time I became an adult, we went into the global recession. And people who've grown up in the 80s and in the 90s and in the early 2000s, we were growing up in this era of wealth and economic growth. So also a lot of fashion, just think of the Y2K stuff, it was just a lot more out there. And that is supposedly why people of my generation will feel more of that nostalgia to the Y2K trends and the flashy things and the sparkles and the logos and the everything, while Gen Z, that's a generation that's really grew up more during the economic recession. Now, as they are approaching adulthood and they were in college, they also had the COVID pandemic. So a lot of what they've grown up with is a lot more toned down, because once we go into recession, fashion also tends to go a little bit with that. And I think we're now experiencing that again, that we are in economically more uncertain times. There's a large part of people that are not doing so well. So also the showing off and the bragging, it's not something that you want to do anymore at this point in time. So also now we're just seeing that people are choosing fashion that doesn't really draw that much attention to themselves anymore. But then perhaps with the added nostalgia, I would usually think of nostalgia as more as a positive thing, that you're looking back at sort of happy memories and you want to relate back to that. But perhaps nostalgia in that sense is also just longing back to what you grew up with. Besides this argument of recession, I think also for people who are a bit older, and then I'm also just talking about my generation, so everybody who's not Gen Z, everybody who's been in the luxury realm for a while, if you're not very strongly longing for those Y2K trends, for example, and for me personally, it's very relatable. I would also classify a lot of my bags as low-key or low-key luxury, depending on the brands that they are. So frankly, this bag over here, that's not really low-key, but this is also one of the loudest bags that I have. Actually, if you watch my channel, if you see my videos, you will see that at least I tend to go for the more quiet things. And I wouldn't really say I ever had a period where I was longing for the big logos and all that kind of stuff, but in any case, when I'm looking at other YouTubers and also when I'm reading comments, it seems that more people are just getting a bit bored of monogram, logos, all that kind of stuff. There's more trend towards just minimizing and ending up with a wardrobe that has more of these classic pieces that go with everything. In that sense, the quiet luxury might be a bit of a trend. Probably once we get again into better times economically, fashion will also adapt to that. But I wouldn't be surprised if the quiet luxury thing really becomes a lot more mainstream. Just because Gen Z seems to appreciate it, and for the older generations, the very loud and screamy fashion is just a bit done and ready to be left in the past. So one final thing that I wanted to touch upon, and that was really not quiet at all, was the invasion of the LVMH headquarters by French protesters. I think earlier this week in France there's been a lot of protests recently about the government increasing the retirement age. With France's aging population, the government is finding it really difficult to cover all of the expenses of pensions. And French protesters basically broke into the LVMH headquarters stating that, well, this is where all the money is. If you need to get money for pensions, then LVMH is a great place to get money. And I think that really signifies the contrast between the extreme wealth of luxury brands and these luxury conglomerates like LVMH, Richemont, and the place that the working class is in. So people have to work very hard to make a living. Tax is quite high. You're making a lot of contribution in that sense to your pension. And when you're being told then that your retirement age is going to go up, I can understand that leads to frustration. Even though for a lot of Europeans, it's been quite difficult to understand why the French are so upset, because their retirement age is still going to be a lot lower than in other countries of the EU. But having a bit more context around the whole problem also makes it a lot more understandable. So there's an enormous discrepancy between these French fashion houses that are also going through extreme price increases all the time, and then just the regular population. I also saw a video or two, I think, about Chanel artisans coming out to complain about the working conditions in the ateliers where the Chanel bags are being made, which for me kind of relates to that. Chanel is, of course, a perfect example of a luxury brand that's gone through crazy price increases. And if you're buying from luxury brands, you are hoping that that massive amount of money that you are paying is at least to some extent going to the sales associate in the store, the person who has made that beautiful bag for you. But it really looks like these price increases are not really benefiting the average normal person, so to say, whether that is just an individual working for Chanel, for example. But it also comes across to the more general population that these fashion houses, which have a very long heritage in France, obviously are not really contributing to the country as a whole. And I'm interested to see how much more backlash that is still going to give all of these brands in the future. So I think that's all that I wanted to discuss today. Just a little bit of a summary that's been going on in the luxury fashion world. I hope you found this interesting and or entertaining. If you have any thoughts about this topic, feel free to drop them down in the comments below, because I'd be very interested in reading them. Remember, for now, there's a styling, a situation, and a taste for everything. So don't judge, wear whatever the bag you like. Until next time, or as we would say in Dutch, doei!